I'd like to welcome someone who's been on the show before, Representative Gregg Amore. Thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, Kate. Appreciate it.
We had you on before to talk about a few pieces of legislation pertaining to guns. One specifically was school resource officers, and then it was also construction reimbursement in the schools.
Correct.
But there's been a lot that's transpired since then, and
Sure.
We're up here today, and there's a number of gun bills. We just spoke with a couple of folks who are going to be testifying. We have the Rhode Island Self-Defense Alliance as well as Sal Cayazzo. So talk with us about today. The State House is packed.
Sure. I mean, this is a constitutional issue, so there's going to be emotions on both sides. There's going to be passions on both sides. And, you know, we've heard some of these arguments year in and year out here. I think the intensity, obviously, is greater because of the Parkland shooting and the number of school shootings. And so, you know, you have advocates on both sides here quite often this session. And today, like many of the previous days, they're here in force.
So talk with us a little bit about, I don't think it was before the red flag legislation was introduced that I'd had you on, past the House, heading to the Senate. Talk with us about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's some common sense gun legislation that everybody can agree on in principle. There may be details in the legislation that maybe even will be challenged in court. But I think in general, there was consensus in the House of Representatives that this was a good idea, that if you have a person who clearly has an issue, some sort of mental problem, some sort of issue in their personal life, that person can be protected, and so can others if there's intervention. And that's the essence. Other states have it, and I think it's a good common sense piece of legislation.
And as you said, working to sort of work those kinks out, there's been talk that there are a number of them as well. I mean, who should really be the arbiter and decider? That's a piece of the legislation that folks have concerns with, and that I know is being worked out.
Yeah, that's a hard issue, but we already see that in family court. We already see that in domestic violence cases. So it's not like this is an unprecedented area in regard to those decisions being made by a judge after action by a police department based on an inquiry or a call.
So we just had Susan Wynn on with the Rhode Island Self-Defense Alliance, and she talked about the need for kind of both sides to work together, both the pro-Second Amendment supporters and gun control folks. Do you think there's been conversations? Do you think there's a middle ground being reached?
Well, I think the school resource officer bill is a middle ground. So my bill has been well received by both sides generally, and we have a fiscal note that's being worked on right now, and that's going to be heard, I think, next week. So yeah, I think that's an area where both sides can say yes. We put a police officer in a school for all the reasons we spoke about before, plus he's there as a last line of defense. He or she is there as last line of defense. So I think that is an area where we can find common ground. I actually think the red flag bill was an area where there was lots of common ground. There was some resistance, but there was lots of common ground.
So we're keeping an eye as that goes over to the Senate. Again, we're up here on a Tuesday specifically for the gun bills today. Talk with us about what is on your plate today, Representative.
So in the Judiciary Committee tonight, a whole host of gun bills. Two of them have my name on them as co-sponsors. You have the so-called assault weapons ban, and you have the other bill that I'm involved in would prevent teachers from being armed for a whole host of reasons, some of which we talked about last time. I'm not opposed to a good guy with a gun in a school, clearly, but I think there are serious issues with arming teachers or incentivizing teachers to be armed. The assault weapons ban is a sticky conversation because it is a Second Amendment conversation. However, even Justice Scalia said that the Second Amendment is not absolute. And we've made cost-benefit analysis decisions on constitutional rights forever. When you walk into an airport, I just came back from vacation, we abandoned our Fourth Amendment rights so that we're protected on that plane and in that airport. I'm not saying to abandon our Second Amendment rights, but there are restrictions that are reasonable. And I think when we look at the cost-benefit analysis, this is one of those.
Do you think that's going to be the most contentious bill this afternoon, is the assault weapons ban?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, from the argument that it's a slippery slope to the argument that we have numbers of citizens who own those weapons, yeah, that's going to be a contentious bill.
Well, we see here the Second Amendment supporters turning out in droves. We see some orange shirts. We see some red shirts, again, for the pro-gun control folks. Again, with the pieces of legislation moving forward today, is it going to be a late night?
I'm glad I'm not on the Judiciary Committee because I spend plenty of nights in finance, long nights. But yes, it's going to be a long night. I mean, traditionally, these bills and bills like them go toward the 11 o'clock hour.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time again. We were able to speak with the previous legislation that you introduced, and again, talking about that support you're getting to having school resource officers in each school. When do we expect that fiscal note?
I think the fiscal note is prepared, so we should be hearing the bill, I think, next week.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll be here at the State House. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity to talk with you more. But again, wanted to talk with you about the bills today before Judiciary, the assault weapons ban, and again, making sure that, as you said, teachers cannot be armed.
Correct.
Okay, we're going to be keeping an eye on the gun legislation here at the State House today as Go Local Live continues to report. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Kate.